For the final time on this journey, good evening. As many of you might venture to imagine, preparing this speech has been a formidable undertaking, one that felt daunting to write, let alone to perform. The moment I found out I had progressed to the Spear finals, a surge of desire, steeped in desperation, washed over me. For days, I stared at blank pages, unable to write a single word. At this point, my parents had practically informed half the planet, so there was no escaping it. Reminders of this monumental task followed me everywhere, to the extent that even the children of those they had told began asking me about it. And in one such conversation, I was asked a simple question. What are you going to speak about? I had no answer. This 10-year-old boy then proceeded to make a firm suggestion. He said, just tell them we are all the same. And truthfully, my immediate thought was almost dismissive. How simplistic. Surely that was far too basic to rival against the caliber of talent I stand among tonight. Was it the proximity of victory that had clouded my judgment? Because in that simple sentence lay the very essence, the lifeblood of the message I have stood for from the very beginning. And perhaps that is where we so often go wrong. Many of us, especially those who feel the weight of responsibility, fall into the trap of idealizing equality, sculpting into some grand, flawless vision that reality must perfectly mirror. We begin to believe it must look a certain way, sound a certain way, arrive in a certain form. Take the suffragettes, stern, courageous, unrelenting in their fight for women's right to vote. They shattered barriers, defied convention, and demanded political recognition in a nation built on their suppression. They faced prison and force-feeding, scorn and street-side beating, yet still kept preaching, still kept marching that their voices were worthy of power and their presence worthy of reaching. Yet even within that movement, equality was not always universal. In Britain, the Representation of the People Act 1918 was passed. The vote for women was only granted for some of them. They fought for women, yes, but only for certain women. For women, but not the working class woman. For women, but not those that weren't rich or married to the rich. So even in revolution, there was reservation. Even in progress, there was preference. Often we make rules to accommodate, to pander to society's discomfort with radical empathy. But to me, selective equality is not equality at all. What more, we freeze at the magnitude of the moral obligation before us, diminishing the efforts of others, dismissing them as too small, too simple, too insignificant to matter. It becomes a quiet competition of moral superiority, a kind of crab mentality where we'd rather pull one another down than rise together. So, instead of inching toward the solution, we turn on one another. We pick and we pry until the real problems multiply. We stand shaking. We force equality into a shape we can display, carving off the inconvenient pieces along the way, and every shard we slice aside is someone's dignity desecrated, denied. This is seen in my generation. We are labeled the sensitive ones, the loud ones, the hysterical and hopelessly dramatic ones, the generation that complains. Our urgency is caricatured, our anger is trivialized, our grief becomes the next passing headline. Why are Gen Z so angry, they ask? As if outrage at injustice were a flaw, as if passion were pathology, as if caring too deeply was the real disorder. So, we belittle the voice, the cracks, the cadence, rather than hear the voice. At the qualifiers, I spoke about my personal struggles with inequality. At the quarterfinals, I challenged the privileged, those who champion only the causes that affect them. At Parliament, I spoke about corruption, about how it corrodes our institutions and distorts our intentions. But now this speech is about us. This is my inward critique for the people like me, those willing to fight. This speech is about the change makers, the outspoken, the fearless. Our message must not be merely convenient conviction. It must not be selective. It must not shrink itself to be palatable, digestible, or easily applauded. Our fight, our message must be consistent. It must be costly if it has to be, and above all else, it must be for everyone. I must admit, it is a tall task, one that cannot be solved by another law draft or another treaty sign. Legislation is necessary, yes, but it does not suffice. The solution is disarmingly simple, yet painfully difficult. The antidote is empathy. Radical empathy, not the kind that trends for a week or the kind that fits neatly into a caption, but the kind that costs us comfort. The kind that starts as small as a listening ear and grows to be as large as a surrendered ego. The kind that is quick to listen and slow to speak. That is what this world is missing. So what does that look like exactly? It looks like funding schools, not smear campaigns. It looks like voting not for favorable tax cuts, but for the policies that affect the vulnerable. It looks like mentoring the child with no privileges, hiring the candidate with no connections, and defending the colleague with no platform. It looks like examining our own bias before exposing someone else's. Radical empathy is not abstract. It is behavioral, it is measurable, it is daily. And when empathy becomes our ignition, rather than a mere afterthought, change stops being selective. It becomes sincere. And so I stand before you today, instructed by a 10-year-old boy to say, we are all the same. Not in uniformity, but in unity. Not in color, not in stature, not in status, but in heart. I stand before you, choosing to embrace that childlike clarity, the kind untainted by ranked human worth, the kind that sees similarity before superiority. And in that same spirit, I leave you all with a line from a film I watched as a child. It goes, "You think the only people who are people are the people who look and think like you. But if you walk the footsteps of a stranger, you'll learn things you never knew. You never knew." Thank you.